welcome back. We're having a look at the life of Jesus. I'm Pastor Dirk Wilner and we're having a look at chapter 3. So open up your books in chapter 3 and we're looking at the baptism of Jesus. It's an interesting thing about baptism of Jesus because another player was on the stage at that time, namely John the Baptist, and he was baptizing in the Jordan River. A lot of people came to him, including Jesus, and then something happened to Jesus at that baptism. That was actually the launch of his ministry. And interesting, as you go and have a look at that ministry, as he went out, what would you expect after his baptism? First thing that he did was actually go out into the wilderness and do battle with Satan. Isn't that interesting that the first thing that we have about Jesus' baptism is really getting into the wild stuff of life? Another thing that happened here about Jesus then teaching about baptism, which is different from the way that John the Baptist taught and actually also did his baptism, was when Jesus in chapter 3 of John was saying, "Truly I tell you, unless you are born of water and the Spirit, you can't see the kingdom of God, you can't be part of the kingdom of God." And he taught us that there's something very important about our physical birth and our spiritual birth. And that is what we talk about being born again. It's not about like Nicodemus says, "How can I be born again? How can I get back into my mum's womb?" That doesn't happen. But Jesus says you've got to be born of the flesh. This is what you have and I have. That's what we experience of life. And then you've got to be born of the Spirit, which is what God puts into you, his presence. And in baptism, we are made part of God's family. A lot of the disciples called Jesus Rabbi, which means teacher. And I asked him to teach him about all sorts of interesting things about life. Most importantly, when you go and have a look at the pages that we're having a look at, he taught us something very important about why it is that baptism is so important for the rest of our life. I think it's a bit like an apple. Here I've got an apple. Everyone knows about an apple. I've got a knife to cut it up because something very important that is inside that I want to show you. As you cut an apple open, you see inside the seeds. Point of an apple, you might think, is to go and eat it. But the purpose of an apple is actually related to the seeds inside to sow yet another apple tree. Those seeds are contained within the one apple, and those seeds, when they grow from that tree, make more and more apples. Baptism, it started off with John the Baptist in regards to Christ, and then from Christ who shared it, and the disciples went all over the world baptizing, including reaching you and me. It's about the fact that from the one suddenly there came many. It's like the seed that was sown in us about our faith, our connection with God. We're all part of the same identity of Christ. So Christ is in us, and the seed of faith is that which bursts out and creates even more than what was even planted. Now don't forget to also do your Faith 5. That's actually a very important time for us to think about our highs, our lows, the good times, the bad times, what's happened in your week. As we share it around with mum and dad and talk about it, we can also pray about it and bless each other. During the week, you might want to then make sure that you do your little devotional. And as you come towards the end, the quiz, have a look at the quiz. Here you see on this page, again, a reminder of what happened to Jesus after he was baptized, sent out into the wilderness. And here you see the temptations that Satan had. "Oh, you're the Son of God, why don't you turn these rocks into bread? Feed yourself." Or, "Hey, you want these kingdoms? I'll give them to you." Or, "What about the getting up to the highest point? Throw yourself off and I'll sort of look, make sure that nothing happens to you." Go and prove that the Bible is for real. Prove that your faith, prove that you're the Son of God. It's interesting that so often in our life, when we're thinking about my faith, your faith, isn't it interesting that prove it comes into it? How do I know that it's for real? How do I know that it's mine? Do you know that in baptism, that is where Luther said, how do we know that it's for real? How do we know it's mine? It's in baptism that God said, this is yours.